I don't know what happened to you just now when you heard that sound. When I heard it, I stopped moving. Something about the sound took my mind somewhere else. That's the sound of a conch shell being blown into like a trumpet off the balcony of the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Arms and Armor Court. The space is huge. Vaulted ceilings, large windows, giant chandeliers. Kind of like a conch concert hall. Long before our modern-day communication systems, people discovered that they could blow into conch shells to produce a sound that carried for many miles. And ever since, cultures across the world have been using the conch as a medium to amplify their voices beyond our body's limitations and to connect with spiritual realms.
Can you imagine the first person who played this conch trumpet and they discovered they had the ability to have a voice that was bigger than their own, that commanded respect and attention, and might have been the voice of the gods, it might have been channeling the voice of the gods?
That's Bradley Strauchen-Scherer. She's a curator of musical instruments at the Met, and she's the one you heard blowing into the conch. The Met has more than 5,000 instruments that cover 6 continents and span about 4,000 years. And out of all these instruments, the conch stands out. Its frequency and vibration can be heard by the ear and felt by the heart.
If you asked me, what is one of the most amazing pieces of art in the Met? I would point towards something that we didn't make. I would point towards some of these conch trumpets in our collection that date from ancient India or from Aztec civilization. It was thousands of years before we, as craftsmen and as musical instrument makers, could produce anything that is acoustically so perfect, that is so extraordinary in its form. That you see echoed across the Met, because you look across our different departments and you find artwork that is inspired by the conch, you find these spiral motifs. All of that is here. And it starts with one of these shells.
From the Metropolitan Museum of Art, I'm Camille Dunshee, and this is Immaterial, where we look at materials commonly used in art and ask what the materials themselves can tell us. In this episode, we're thinking about shells as a material, and we're focusing on one particular shell, the conch. How does a sea creature's home become a medium for our own transformation? Why does playing the conch shell feel so extraordinary? And what is it about this sound that has captured our attention for thousands of years? Shells are a surprisingly common material in art. The Met cares for thousands of items made with seashells, like a Malian face mask inlaid with cowrie shells, or a Native American basket made from abalone shells, or an ancient Egyptian amulet made using oyster shells. Hundreds of objects at the Met feature the conch shell in particular. There's a necklace from Panama made with conch shell dating back to the 5th century CE, and a 10th century sandstone stela of the Hindu god Vishnu, holding a conch as a weapon to destroy evil. One piece that stands out is a helmet made from steel and shaped to resemble a sea conch from 17th century Japan.
So this Japanese helmet is made of thin sheets of embossed steel, which are all put together to resemble a sea conch.
That's Marcus Sesko, a visiting researcher in the Arms and Armor Department.
And at the very top, you have a little extra piece which represents the mouthpiece. It represents a trumpet shell that was used for signaling.
He says the helmet was worn on the battlefield by high-ranking Japanese commanders. It reminds me of the way a conch shell serves as armor for the animal inside.
The commanders had to stand out for the troops to be visible. So everyone tried to individualize their armor and their helmets. So this is where all these eccentric helmet shapes came in. Only military commanders had those really flamboyant helmets. So it would have been worn by a fairly high-ranking military commander, and his troops would have easily recognized him on the battlefield wearing this helmet.
The Met's collection holds many conch trumpets that have been used in spiritual traditions all over the world. To show our historic transformation from the conch shell into a trumpet, Bradley's placed one at the center of a Met display that showcases instruments from across time and place. From a reproduced ancient Roman cornu to a vuvuzela from the 2010 FIFA World Cup.
I put this conch shell in the center of it, and I said, it's the center of everything because it's all about why people play brass instruments or just in general, why they play music. It's about signaling, it's about ritual, it's about status, and it's about making music. So it's a feeling of great power, but it's also a very organic feeling. I think sometimes in our life today, with all our amazing technology, we often feel detached from the really gritty aspect of being connected with the fundamental elements. One of the reasons I enjoy playing the natural horn so much is that you don't have any technology. It's just your lips and your hand changing the notes. And with the conch, it's even purer than that. It's as close as I feel to being part of the earth.
There's just something about shells that evoke wonder. Perhaps it's because shells come from this mysterious place, the ocean. The ocean takes up more than 2/3 of the Earth's surface, yet more than 80% of the ocean has never been mapped, explored, or even seen by humans. But we have hints of this world's depths and powers from shells. Beachcombers know that no two shells are exactly alike. Seashells appear in an endless array of colors and shapes, and researchers have just discovered that this variation extends to the molecular level. Each shell is as unique as a fingerprint. Some are shiny and colorful, some are weathered and scarred, some are intact, some are broken, some can grow to several feet long, and some can fit in the palm of your hand. Like us, each shell has its own story.
It was alive once. A shell was alive once. And there's something about that when you put air through something that was alive, when it vibrates in a different way than putting air through something that wasn't alive.
That's master trombonist Steve Teray. He's recorded and toured with music legends like Ray Charles, Dizzy Gillespie, Max Roach, and Santana, just to name a few. You may have seen him play the trombone on Saturday Night Live, a gig he's had for nearly 40 years. But you might not know that he's also one of the world's best conch shell players. Bradley calls Steve her conch shell hero. And as Steve says, you can hear and feel the difference when you play an instrument from the sea compared to something man-made. Here's Steve on the trombone. And now, here's the same tune on the shells.
It takes me to a different zone than the trombone, absolutely. Yeah, it's a whole different experience, and it's more organic. It's less intellectual than the trombone. It's more spiritual.
Steve is kind of like a rare shell. He's down to earth, yet he has this air of mystery. He's tall, has jet black hair that he keeps neatly in a long braid, and an impressively full goatee. Around his neck, there's a conch shell necklace cast in gold. And like the shell, there's something visceral about Steve that grounds you, both in the present and in this otherworldly spiritual realm. That's why for Steve, the shell is not just another instrument. How did Steve go from playing the trombone to the shell? It all started when he was just a teenager, more than 50 years ago, when he went to see one of his favorite musicians play at a jazz club in San Francisco.
His name was Roland Kirk, or later on, Rahsaan Roland Kirk. He played saxophone and flute, and he not only played them individually, he played them all at once, 3 saxophones at once. Roland Kirk was also the champion of circular breathing. Now, I know they did a publicity stunt for Kenny G where he held some note for the Guinness people and all that. Please, Roland Kirk would have wiped him out. And he was blind and self-taught. If he had gone to school, they would have told him, you can't do that, you know. But it was amazing, man. It wasn't a joke, man. You know, it was amazing.
One time Rahsaan Roland Kirk came through town, he invited Steve to play with him. And when they were up on stage, Steve noticed a shell sitting on a chair.
I asked him, I said, well, you gonna ever play that one? What are you gonna do? He said, I'll play when the time is right. And right in the front table, right in front of the bandstand, there's this couple there. And they proceed to get drunk. I mean, really drunk. Total disregard for the music. They talking loud, having a conversation. And so he took a shell and he circular breathing. He just held the note. And he held it for the longest time, man, maybe 5 minutes. I mean, and when you're holding a note, that's a long time. And finally, these people, they quit talking. They looked up in amazement. And man, when they quit talking and looked up, everybody in the club, yeah, they clapped. And then it was quiet. And in that moment of quiet, he took the tenor saxophone, went into a real pretty ballad, real breathy, and you know, it was beautiful. What a moment. But the sound of the shell kind of brought peace, you know, it was such a peaceful sound. So at the end of the night, I asked him, I said, oh, I like that sound. Could I try that? And he let me blow it. And I say, yeah, I'm getting one of these.
As Steve's telling the story, he's in his living room, holding the first shell he got after that moment in the club, a Triton shell. The room is lush, full of these bright tropical plants that Steve loves tending to. Feels almost like you're on a film set based in some glamorous jungle, but we're in New Jersey. The shell he's holding fits perfectly into this world that he's cultivated. The shell has these stunning earthy tones and a geometric yellow and brown pattern on the outside. It's named after the Greek god, Triton, son of Poseidon, the god of the seas. In Greek mythology, Triton was said to blow into the conch to control the weather, to whip up the winds or blow them away.
I played it on most of my recordings, and it's the first one I got. My mom got it for me, so it has very sentimental value. So there you have it.
Our attraction to shells is both universal and deeply personal. Their beauty, color, and symmetry has collectively inspired civilizations across time. But how they reveal themselves to us is often what stands out most in our memories. There's an element of luck and serendipity to it all. It's almost like some cosmic coincidence to cross paths with a shell, like a chance encounter with a messenger from another world. We find them, and they find us. We collect them, but there's still so much we don't know about them.
I find it fascinating that this passion for shells, you see it reaching backwards through the millennia across different cultures. So it's intangible what it is about this magic spiral that connects everyone. But as I look at these shells, I think, how do they do it? How and why do the members of the conch family and these various marine snails produce these really amazing shells?
Shells are made by soft-bodied animals called mollusks, which pull seawater and mix it with components from their own bodies to build their shells out of calcium and carbonate. It's magical. Over hundreds of millions of years, mollusks evolved to develop shells as an innovative means to protect themselves. They're able to make this, technologically speaking, super fancy structure out of basic materials. It's ultra resilient. It protects them from predators like big, powerful crabs who would break their shells and eat them. Holding a shell, you can really appreciate how strong it is. It seems almost indestructible, like it could last forever. So how long does it take a mollusk to make this impressively durable shell? This question has been on Bradley's mind ever since a visitor at the Met asked about the description of the 19-inch conch-shelled trumpet featured at the center of their musical instrument display.
I've read your label for this, and it can't be right. And I thought, oh gosh, what have we done? And we had the species name, we had trumpet, we had location, and then it was the date. The date was 2017. And so the visitor said to me, this shell, it's been around a lot longer than 2017, even if you just picked it up off the beach yesterday. How old is it really?
To solve this mystery, Bradley reached out to Josea Leal, a marine biologist who is the science director and curator at the National Shell Museum. Dr. Leal says, depending on the species of the conch, the mollusk could live up to 40 years inside its shell. Of course, a shell found washed up and empty could be much, much older. One of the things that makes empty shells feel timeless is how long they've been around. Shells evolved 500 million years ago. So holding one, it's almost as if you can sense this ancient energy they embody. It's difficult to rationalize why cultures independent of one another have been drawn to use and play conch shells for thousands of years. But it makes sense once you hear them. The most recent discovery of ancient conch shells being used as wind instruments was in a cave in the French Pyrenees. These shells were brought to the cave more than 17,000 years ago, all the way from the Atlantic Ocean. That's over 150 miles away. Finding conch trumpets in unexpected locations, such as places very far from the coastlines, is actually quite common. They can be heard on mountaintops throughout Asia and from the peaks of the Peruvian Andes. Within the Met's collection, the oldest shell trumpets have lived much longer above water than below. Some date back to ancient civilizations across Oceania, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. The conch has become a metaphysical symbol of fertility, luck, infinity, and interconnectedness.
So on this musical level, conchs are hugely central to spirituality. They're bound up with origin stories in many cultures. So when we think about the Aztecs, Quetzalcoatl was said to sort of breathe life into the universe, creating sound with a giant conch shell.
On the other side of the world, the conch sound is also associated with origin stories in Hindu and Tibetan Buddhist traditions.
The sound of the conch is said to represent the sacred syllable Om. And this is the first sound of the universe.
In Hinduism, the conch is representative of the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and space. The Hindu word for conch literally translates to pacifying the inauspicious. To this day, Conch shells are used in Hindu puja ceremonies as receptacles for holy water, and they are also blown into due to the belief that the vibrations emitted from the conch will dispel negative energy and purify the environment.
The conch is also popular in lots of spiritual practice as a visual aid for meditation because you have the spiral, you've got this Fibonacci sequence ever increasing. And you think about what do you look at to hypnotize someone? It's the spiral.
Coming up on Immaterial, we'll visit the world's conch shell capital and go back in time to Mexico City with Steve Teray to the night that changed his connection with the conch trumpet forever. While touring as a musician, Steve picked up conch shells from all over, but there's one place where many of the shells in his collection are from: the self-proclaimed shell capital of the world, Key West, Florida. There, and throughout much of the Caribbean, conch shells are ubiquitous. They're a cultural icon, foghorn, and food staple. Locals born in Key West even call themselves conchs. There, you'll find conch parades and festivals, conch blowing contests, hurricane-hardened conch houses, menus featuring conch ceviche, chowder and fritters, and shell-themed souvenir shops.
I have hanging on my wall at home a certificate proclaiming that I'm an honorary conch because of all the years I've lived here and because of my business.
That's Jim Waterman, the founder of Shell World, a much-beloved local treasure that Steve discovered one day when driving down the overseas highway.
We were driving down through Key Largo, and I said, wow, look at that place. There's a big shell. There's that great big shell out by the road.
When Steve pulled up to Shell World and strolled in past the giant shark jaw at the entrance, he found a massive 18,000 square foot store selling more than 250 different types of shells from all over the world. Some cost as little as $0.25. Others will set you back more than $5,000.
And I went in there and I got a whole bunch of shells. I felt like a kid in the candy store, I gotta tell you.
Steve's recounting this story to Jim and his daughter, Julia, who practically grew up inside of Shell World. Jim had been collecting shells ever since he was a kid. His parents would take him out on their boat into the shallow marsh waters to fish for them.
And we gathered the shells only for the meat because there was no market for shells in those days. And we sold the shell with the meat to the local fish house for 25 cents a piece. They would take the meat out and they would throw the shell away. Those are shells, if I had them today in my store, I could get $30 a piece for them.
Jim estimates that in his lifetime, he has collected about 50,000 conch shells and sold more than 20,000 conch trumpets.
The only thing I can do is make a lot of noise with mine. I could probably satisfy the Coast Guard. You have to have a horn on every boat.
It carries.
But as common as conch shells are to Key West, it's pretty rare to hear them played like an instrument. And that's because you can't just pick one up on the beach and start playing it immediately. You actually have to cut off the tip of the shell to make a small opening that you can blow into. The spiral expanding inside the shell forms an ideal wind wave for strong, clear tones. But of course, unlike a brass instrument, not all conch shells sound exactly alike. Their sound is determined by where they're from, their species, and their size. That's why when you see Steve perform, he often has conch shells from all over the world spread out on the table before him. Steve can get this extraordinary range of notes by playing different types of conch, sometimes several at the same time.
Each one has its own personality. The primary tone on a shell, they're all different, and they all aren't perfectly on pitch. Some of them are a little off. And they all have a decent sound, but some of them sound better than others. This one, a frog shell from the Philippines and a trident shell, they always have a good sound.
And when Steve plays the shells, he can play notes like a bugle. He's also learned that by sliding his hand in and out of the conch shell's opening, he can make different notes, like he would on the trombone.
It wasn't something I set out to do. I was shy about presenting it because Roland Kirk, he played three horns at once, and he would receive criticism sometimes. So, that's just a gimmick. And it wasn't really. It was beautiful music. I became aware that there are always going to be naysayers and all that stuff. And so I was, guarded, shall we say. But then I had an experience.
It was 1983. Steve was playing a gig with master trumpet player Woody Shaw in Mexico City.
And my relatives came to the concert, and they told me, man, did you know that your ancestors used to play the shells? And I said, no, I didn't know. So that I went to the museum there, the archaeology museum, and they had queen conch instruments like this that the Aztec and the Maya used to play. And I said, no wonder I'm attracted to this sound. I think it's part of me. It's something inside,
It was like this aha moment for Steve, discovering this connection between the shell and his ancestors. He realized playing the conch was actually not so random. It was like he's supposed to do it. And so he decided,
I don't care what people think. I'm just going to play it. And I started playing it. And I just kind of go with what feels right. I trust intuition a lot of times more than I trust your thought process. I'll put it this way. Intuition is connected to wisdom. Now, I know in Western culture, intellect is supposed to be the crown king. But I beg to differ with that. I feel wisdom always surpasses intellect. So to me, wisdom, body, mind, and spirit is a more powerful force.
Playing the conch became a way for Steve to connect not only with his Mexican roots, but also to other cultures that have been playing the shell for thousands of years. One of the most prized shells in his collection is an ancient conch trumpet from Peru. In Peru, conch trumpets dating from before the Incas were excavated from this monumental ceremonial complex called Chavin de Huantar, a sacred pilgrimage site that was constructed as early as 1200 BCE. It is believed to be architecturally designed to mimic the echoey acoustics you get inside of a cave.
Finding such instruments at an archaeological site is tremendous. Why? Why seashells in the mountains? That's the first question.
That's Miriam Kolar. Miriam leads the investigation team at this ancient ceremonial complex where 12 conch shell trumpets, locally called patutus, were found.
Why would they be brought at least a 12 days journey from the coast, taken at great cost as probably live animals from the ocean, right? And brought to get to a place that's kind of up and away and far from everything.
Each shell is different visually and acoustically. Depictions of these superhuman and animal-like figures playing the patutus can be seen on the walls of the complex and also carved onto the shells themselves.
So we have these beautiful rock faces in this very narrow valley where two rivers intersect. So when you're down in the site and you're kind of looking up around you, you see these towering rock faces and very steep mountains on both sides. So it's this impressive place itself, quite a destination.
And by the time the patutus reached the mountains, the animal had been removed, so there was this great mystique around the creature that lived inside of it. The patutus were believed to have transformational powers.
At Chavin, it's clear that only one species of conch was preferred. The name of this animal now is Titanostrambus galeatus. What a name. It's like the T-Rex of conch shells. So we had this amazing opportunity to hold and perform this 3,000-year-old conch shell. It has a shape that produces such a clear and powerful tone that is quite robust to wind shear because of the frequencies that's produced. So that makes it useful in a high altitude place where you have a lot of wind if you're trying to use them to communicate at distance.
Playing the ancient patutus at the site today, Miriam got a sense of how they may have sounded thousands of years ago.
When you perform these patutus on tops of the buildings at Chavin, you get these 360-degree swirling soundscapes where the sound is just ricocheting off of the rock faces around you and the buildings as well.
Investigating Chavin's architecture, the mystery as to why these shells ended up all the way in the mountains at this particular site starts to unfold. They were there to be heard. It's believed that the patutus were used not only to communicate across distances, they were also played inside the structure's echoey chambers. They were used as ritualistic tools to control the weather and the cosmos, and they were used to honor and connect with the Apu, or mountain spirits.
So if you look at the stone carvings, there are two of them excavated in place that are patutu performers. And they have these very large eyes, and that's been interpreted as an association with a kind of trance-like state, probably from ingesting hallucinogenic plants. But it could also be from being kind of entrained in this rhythmic, breathing, performative trancing cycle that's musical.
Along with documenting the acoustic properties of the shell from a pure archaeological perspective, Miriam invited local performers to improv on the patutus, to experiment with how they may have sounded in a spiritual ceremony.
And then my colleague was demonstrating, wow, look at how loud and powerful and this hybrid imaginative creature we can make sonically with these instruments, right?
Here's Raymond Ramirez imitating a jaguar on the patutus. Miriam also invited Peruvian master musician and sound healer Tito La Rosa to play.
I wonder, who were the people that played patutus in Chavin? Were they master musicians like Tito La Rosa or Steve Turday, who have these incredible capacities to perform these instruments, who are, these creative geniuses that we're just in awe of the experiences that they can create sonically and performatively for us. Sound has always been so important to human beings and to life on this planet. I mean, it's this basic means and medium of interconnecting us and interconnecting us with stuff that's happening in the environment and other living beings with humans and humans with ideas of things that may not be tangible, right?
And what better way to honor the shell and its ability to connect us than to surprise Bradley and have her meet her conch shell hero?
Welcome.
Hey, how are you? It is such a pleasure to meet you.
When Bradley and Steve met, they immediately started comparing their shell collections like two excited kids. After all, it's not that common to get to nerd out with a fellow seashellist.
This is my granddaddy. It's got a lot of energy in the colors. It's alive, it vibrates.
And by granddaddy, he's not kidding. Steve's holding the world's largest known seashell, the Australian syrinx shell. The biggest ones can weigh up to 40 pounds. The exterior of Steve's shell was painted in stunning earth tones by a Cuban artist friend of his. The syrinx covers about a quarter of Steve's body. Bradley hauled her own unadorned giant syrinx shell on the train over.
You want to hear something crazy? Just hold your F. You hear that low note?
Oh, yeah.
Because the two together vibrate the air in such a way that it created a third note. It was strong, man. When you hear all of the room that's resonating, this is different than brass.
I hear it and I feel it right in my chest.
Yeah, here's it. Yeah.
It's giving me goosebumps. It is really, really powerful.
It's deep. And it makes the whole room shake.
It's almost as if shells hold this secret wisdom, this ancient yet timeless secret, this whisper from the ocean. Kind of like if you've ever found a conch shell on the beach and held it up to your ear. You know how you can hear the ocean ringing through your ears?
You hear the but you don't hear the wave break, and that's the sound I like, the waves breaking, you know, so that's the ocean to me.
There's something about the sound of the ocean that stays with us, deep in our memory. And in our fast-paced digital world, it's almost like a spiritual experience to sense this power from something we didn't make. Like shells, we are part of everything that is here. And everything that is here is also shaping us. We may think we're rulers over the natural world and that we're in control, but we are as ephemeral as sound. We are made up of materials that will dissolve back into the earth, connecting us to one another and connecting us to other realms. Immaterial is produced by the Metropolitan Museum of Art and Magnificent Noise. This episode was produced by Elise Blennerhassett. Our production staff also includes Jesse Baker, Eric Newsom, Adjoa Gemma Brimpong, and Eleanor Kagan. And from the Metropolitan Museum, Sophie Anderson, Sarah Wombold, Benjamin Corman, and Rachel Smith. Sound design by Ariana Martinez and Elise Blennerhassett. Mixing by Ariana Martinez and Kristen Muller. Fact-checking by Christine Baird. The podcast was made possible by Dasha Zukova-Nyarkos. Additional support is provided by Bloomberg Philanthropies. This episode would not have been possible without Bradley Strauchen-Scherer, curator of musical instruments, Tim Castor, principal departmental technician, Marcus Sesko, visiting researcher of arms and armor, John Guy, curator of South and Southeast Asian art, Maya Naku, curator of oceanic art, and James Doyle, former assistant curator for arts of the ancient Americas. And our deepest gratitude to Steve Teray, Miriam Kolar, Hosea Leal, and Jim and Julia Waterman for your time and expertise. Our music in this episode was performed and composed by Steve Teray, Lemon Gua, Sophia Shin, Elise Blennerhassett, Austin Fisher, and Chris Zabriskie. Shell recordings from Chavin provided by Miriam Kolar and performed by Miriam Kolar, Robert Silva, Ricardo Guerrero La Luna, Raymond Ramirez, Ronald San Miguel, and Tito La Rosa. Additional recordings by Paul Schneider, Eleanor Kagan, Elise Blennerhassett, and Peter Rinaldi. I'm Camille Dunshee.